Hey everybody, the Bedbug Guy is here. Uh, Happy 4th of July. I'm recording this on the 4th to all my American colleagues. And today I wanted to start talking about the ancient Egyptian medical profession. And sorry if you hear some buzzing in the background. That it's the 4th of July, everybody's off, and people have decided everybody's going to mow their lawns today. So I'm trying to mitigate that just so I can get a video done. Hopefully, I can cure that in editing. Anyway, I wanted to talk specifically about veterinary medicine, but we'll start with just a broad overview of the ancient Egyptian medical profession and then go into the specifics. So, it's well known that the ancient Egyptians were very advanced and were pioneers in the medical field. Now, a lot of credit is given to the Greeks for the modern medical system, but they're more than happy to take credit for things they learned from the Egyptians, just like with math and other things. But the Egyptian medicine goes back all the way into prehistory. You know, with just like any other primitive culture, they had local healers and whatnot, and through trial, error, and experimentation, they figured a lot of stuff out. So they had a few centuries of practice. Well, when you get into the Old Kingdom, they started to write it down in medical text. And in the Old Kingdom, it really did become a profession, a career. They had a hierarchical system, chief doctors, inspectors, well, and just aside about inspectors, I've said this before, but you know, Egypt has just the most perfect art and architecture and little objects. And I've said they were so good at it because pretty much every job had an inspector devoted to it. I mean, you imagine how good of a job you're going to do if there's always somebody looking over your shoulder and making sure you're doing it right. But that's the way it was. Now, your ancient Egyptian doctor was not called doctor. The term, if you want to pronounce it correctly, I don't know, but it would have been something like Sunu. And at some point, anybody pretty much could be a doctor as long as they were literate. And they did have to train with established doctors. They didn't really have a medical school per se. If you want to be a doctor and you could read, you would more or less apprentice and work for another doctor. It's pretty much like today. Once you get out of medical school, you don't just go out and start your own practice. You have to go and train with doctors for a long time before you can go out on your own to just gain that real world knowledge. Now, at some point, like I said, they wrote everything down. So we have medical texts from ancient Egypt, and the knowledge is separated that these more or less textbooks deal with specific things. You have a trauma papyrus, a surgical papyrus, um, a disease papyrus, and today we're going to be talking about a specific papyrus called the Kahun papyrus. And I'll get into that in a minute. So, just briefly, what was it like to go to the doctor? Well, eventually, they also came up with specialists, eye doctors, dentists, and of course, some veterinarians. And if you went to the doctor with whatever condition you had, you would see the doctor, and he had these medical texts, and they were set up with symptoms, diagnosis, treatment. If he didn't know what it was, he could refer to that and figure it out. And along with their medical profession and the hierarchy, there was sort of a system of doing things, kind of like a pre-ethic code. So when you went to the doctor and you told him what was wrong and he diagnosed it, there were only three things he could say to you before he continued on. The first thing would be, I can heal this. It means I know what this is. I know how to treat it. Just we're going to do this, that, and the other. You'll say a few spells, maybe a prescription, and you're going to be good to go. Okay? and from either some sickness or a broken bone or a wound. They know how to do that. Now, if you came in, said your symptoms, the next thing he could say is, I will fight this. And that means I know what it is. There are treatments available, but there's no guarantee on the outcome. Okay. I mean, I'll treat it, but I can't guarantee anything. Now, the third thing he could say is, I cannot heal this. And that's the ancient Egyptian way of saying, you're screwed. And he could always go get a second opinion, or if it was bad enough, he's going to give you card to his buddy Rahotep down at the Happy Osiris mortuary because it's never too early to plan. So, what would happen if your pet was sick? Did they have veterinarians? That's a yes and no question. It appears that if your cat or dog or whatever was sick, you could take him to your doctor, and they would generally know what to do. So what we're going to be referring to today is the Kahun medical papyrus. And it was found in 1889 in the Fayum by Sir Flinders Petrie. And it dates to around 1900 BC. And there's two unique things about this particular papyrus. One is it currently is the oldest known medical text. Currently. They may find an older one later, but right now, as of today, it's the oldest one. And the other unique thing is it deals with specifically gynecological and veterinary medicine, so women and animals. Well, why so specific? Well, they figured out a long time ago that women and animals have different plumbing. Okay, so the reproductive system is going to cause unique problems to women as opposed to men. So they had specific treatments for specific things having to do with women and childbirth. Also, animals have different plumbing, where trauma is pretty much the same. However, the internal workings are different. So if you have certain sicknesses, the treatments are going to be different. Now, this is important because they had pretty much any type of pet that you could have. These people had fish, birds, dogs, primates like baboons and monkeys. Those were common. Even hippos. These guys had felines from all the way from house cats up to jungle predators that they kept as pets. So they came up with medicine for the animals. Now, the Kahun papyrus is very fragmented. So where it lists these diagnosis, symptoms, diagnosis, treatments, a lot of it is actually missing, but there are significant portions that you can look at, right? So what I'll be working from is the Asuit Veterinary Medical Journal, Volume 65, number 162 from July of 2019, where this is a scientific paper that was covered on veterinary medicine from the Kahun papyrus. So this is where the translations come from and what exactly is going on. So, like I said, some of it's incomplete, but we have three more or less mostly complete treatments for animals. You know, we'll do our best. So the first one is discussing the cattle disease Ushao, and the veterinary doctor says this is trypanosomiasis, which is a common cattle condition. So here's what it says. Treatment of the eyes of a bull with Ushao in winter, currently seasonal. If you see a bull with Ushao in winter and he is blinded, his two eyes are thick. Okay. Gash as above. If you see a bull with Ushao in the winter from cold, since its arrival in the summer, his temples are wrinkled, his eyes are running, his stomach groaning, he does not walk, and then the next part is missing. It says cover all his body with, and it's missing, as done to one with a bruise. So it's more or less the same treatment as a person who's been bruised. It's incomplete. We don't exactly know. How about something a little more complete? Treatment for a dog with a nest of worms. Yes, dog with worms. When it is scenting the ground, it falls down. It says has a mysterious prostration as to it. When the incantations have been said, uh, side note, a lot of treatments come with a spell. I covered that in the ancient Egyptian magic. It said you should thrust your hand within its, it says hemu, but that's its hind end, with a henu of water at your side. When the hand reaches to wash the bone of its back, you should wash your hand in the henu of water each time that the hand becomes gummed up until you have drawn forth the heat, tried blood, or anything else in the excrement. Okay? So that's how much they love their animals. It says you will know that he is cured on the coming of the excrement. So next time he takes a crap, you either going to see worms or you won't. And it says also keep your fingers, and then the rest of it. So that's an important part. What do you do with your fingers? So that's how they would treat a dog with worms. And then you have another treatment for livestock for a bull, which is fairly complete. And it says if you see a bull with wind, haha, his eyes running, his forehead wrinkled, the gums of his teeth red, his neck swollen, repeat the incantation for him. Gotta say the spell. Let him be laid on his side. Let him be sprinkled with cold water. Let his eyes and hoofs and all his body be rubbed with gourds or melons. Let him be fumigated with the gourds. And then it's missing a part. It said, wait, herdsman, missing, be soaked, missing, that it draws in soaking, missing, until it dissolves into water. Let him be rubbed with gourds of cucumbers. Then you gash him upon his nose and tail, and say as to it, he that has cut either dies with it or lives with it. If he does not recover and he is wrinkled under your fingers and blinks his eyes, you should bandage his eyes with linens lighted with fire to stop the running. Now here's the thing. Did this stuff work? Well, they wrote it down, so it must have worked more often than not. We don't use that stuff today. So, now, sadly, the pieces about fish and birds and cats and most of they're heavily fragmented. We know that's what they're discussing, but we don't know what the symptoms and diagnosis and treatment are. I wish we did, but it's heavily fragmented. So let's talk about livestock. Like I said, you take your pet to the veterinarian. If there is a veterinarian that's actual specialist, yes, but you could actually take it to a doctor. Well, what about on a livestock ranch, as to say? The overseers of the cattle were usually your veterinarians. They knew how to take care of the cattle. So your cowboys and your shepherds knew basic veterinary medicine, and if they didn't, they could call a doctor. More information, not just from this papyrus, but we have it from artwork on tomb walls. And what you got the manual removing of calves, removal of the placenta, maintaining the offspring's health, and rectal and vaginal examinations of the cattle. So I'll show you a relief here of a cow examined on one side, and of course a bull on the other side doing his job to make more cows. And that is from the necropolis of Saqqara, and this piece is in the Louvre Museum. Okay. And here's an assisted birth from the Pedosiris tomb at Tuna el Gebel. Okay. So, it looks the same. It's something that would make any modern cattle rancher or even Taylor Sheridan look. He knows exactly what's going on in these pictures. So, unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of examples of veterinary medicine. These are pretty much the best. We know they wrote it down. they're pretty much the first to have a practice of veterinary medicine that even carries through to today. So that's pretty much it. As far as the other papyri, I'm going to cover those in their specific videos because, some of those are a little bit better. You got a lot more you can deal with, and some of them really interesting, especially some of the gynecological stuff in this papyrus. Uh, any women out there, I asked my wife, I don't know what terrors of the womb are, but that's one of the diagnoses coming up in that particular video. So if all of you could think about that when I do the next video, maybe you could answer and tell me exactly what that is. Other than that, thanks for stopping by. Please give me a like and a subscribe. Don't be afraid to leave comments in the comment section. I love the interaction. I love to hear when I'm wrong or pointed in a different direction, so please do. Till next time, thanks for stopping by.